What's going on, Matt? How are we doing today?
Doing wonderful. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. So today I wanted to dive into the number one most important aspect of our business, and that is protecting our investor capital. So we ran into a little bit of a snafu over the last couple of weeks. Why don't you dive into what we ran into and how we were able to protect our investor capital?
Yeah, absolutely. We got into contract on a property. So we underwrote the deal. Everything looked great from afar. All the numbers checked out. Returns looked good. We go into the due diligence process, and this is where we start to uncover and peel back the onions of the true property itself and how it's operating, the tenant base, everything from A to Z. We walked 28 units in every unit going through the inspections. Of those 28 units, about half of them had leaky faucets, mold in the bathroom. Things were not very cleaned up, we'll say. There could be a variety of reasons as to why, but the ultimate reason being the owner of the property was very hands off. They had a property management company in place, but the project was not run very efficiently or cleanly in that manner.
Yeah, and now those issues are not necessarily the worst thing. That can be a delight to see when you're buying a property. However, the initial price that we got into it at was assuming that those issues were not there. So we would have had to spend an exorbitant amount of money just to get the property to the position to where we could pay that price.
Yeah, ultimately it did not pencil. And we were back and forth with the seller on negotiations and trying to come to a price where we felt comfortable putting our investors' money into this deal. And ultimately we made the decision to back out of the deal and protect our investors' money.
Before we dive into that, I think it's important to note kind of the sentiment or the feeling we got when we walked onto the property. Uh, and I remember we have a video of it, but we were walking the property, and when you first drive in, it's like, oh, this the area is nice. It's we had already done a virtual walk of the property like we've mentioned in the past. We drove into the property. It looked solid at from the first building, and the further you get back, it just looked rougher and rougher and rougher and rougher as you go. And adjacent property to this property was a 24 unit apartment complex that we found out later that we didn't know before going into contract was that the seller that was selling this property also owned that property, and the guy did a renovation of the property, was bleeding money, and said get as many heads in beds as you possibly can as fast as you possibly can, which is a recipe for complete disaster. And that is a recipe for some bad tenants. And we found that out the hard way. We were going through our due diligence walkthrough. We were walking the units, and we saw a lot of drug deals going on. We saw crackheads galore going through that property. And for me, that was an immediate turnoff. Coming from property management, seeing homeless, seeing crackheads, seeing some tough, I know there's a nicer way to say it, but seeing some tough people, I do not feel comfortable putting our investor capital into that, putting our property manager at risk, trying to clean up that property, which you can't really do unless you buy that property as well. So for us, for me, it was an automatic turnoff mixed with all of the extra work we had to do. And then on top of that, because you think about it, if you have a certain tenant base that's willing to live next door to all of that traffic has to go away in order to increase your tenant base. And then there's no knowing or no telling how much you can increase your tenant base so you can increase your rents. So ultimately, we made the right decision. In our opinion, we made the right decision to back out. Now, did we lose our own money? Did we lose $5,000 because of some crackheads? Yes, we did.
Sure
Yes.
did. Sure did. Where we lost that money, inspections, flights, getting out there. We had to pay for other things such as sewer scopings, contractors coming out that were giving us bids. Not that we paid for them, but time and effort wasted there, and paying contract attorney,
Yeah.
making sure we're going through the process correctly. We lost around $5,000.
Yeah, and I would do it. I'd do it 100 times, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we want to learn from our mistakes, and we don't want to make that mistake again. But I would do it 100 times before getting into contract or before closing on a deal with our investor money and putting that investor money at risk, because it's just not worth it. It's not what we signed up to do. It's not our business model. It's not what's most important to us. And what's most important
Right.
to us is making sure that we are able to capture the returns and as risk-free as possible. I know you can't get full risk-free, but as mitigating as much risk as we possibly can. We didn't feel we could do that with that property. But we also did not have the worst day. Our partner came in and he decided he wanted to drive to Arizona, and he said, you know what, I'm thinking about getting an electric vehicle, so I'm going to drive an electric vehicle from San Diego, California to Tucson, Arizona, which is a 6-hour drive, just A to B, without any traffic, without stops. And he got a Ford F-150 electric car, which already takes more electrical power. So it took him 13 hours to get there. So he got there at the tail end of our inspection and was there for a total of like 3 hours. It took 13 hours
Three
to
and a
get there.
half. Yeah.
It took 13 hours to get there, was in Tucson for 3.5, and then ended up tried to save money, but then ended up having to pay for a flight to fly back because he didn't want to drive 13 hours back. It was,
Yeah, that would have been
got a
rough.
ticket. So we were not the total losers of the day. Not to say our partner's a loser.
We were not.
But I think ultimately we made the right decision. I think we made a smart decision, a business decision based on the factors that came in. And you can't see all of those. I mean, you were out at the property. Tell me what you thought the first time you were at the property. You missed, but there's no way of seeing it.
There's no way of seeing it, and the reason being is I was there on a Tuesday around 1 p.m. Not many people were home. A lot of people were at work. We walked 2 vacant units, which they had already cleaned up and were on the market ready to lease. So those 2 units were in pretty good shape. When we were there doing inspections, majority of the tenants were home because we were going through each unit. So they wanted to be home, making sure they were at least overseeing anything that we were walking through. But we saw the tenant base there. I saw one family when I walked it that Tuesday. Looked like a very nice family. They had a little kid, cleaned up place. I didn't go inside of that one, but from the exterior, it looked fine.
Yeah. And when we were there, it was almost like I don't want to, again, there's a better way to say this, but it was almost like the cockroaches came out, and I don't mean the people, but just all of the demons within that property came out that day. And Matt
one being the sewer line backed up the day of inspection.
Yeah. And Matt asked, why did I not see it the day before, or the first day I came out there? And my answer was, well, when you have an inspection scheduled, people don't necessarily want you in their property or in their house. People don't want you to be in their house without you there. So more people stayed home that day or came back during the time of the inspection, came back from work during the time of the inspection to be in the unit while we were walking it, because they've got things. I mean, they don't trust us, and understandably so. So we were able to see kind of the tenant base. We were able to see the surrounding area and what that looked like. And ultimately, we decided that we need to button up our initial screening of properties in order to get into these types of deals. So yeah, and we also learned that a C-class property in Tucson is much different than a C-class property in LA or San Diego where we live. It's
very different.
In a C-class tenant, similar is way different in San Diego than it is in Tucson and different markets. So that was an interesting takeaway from it too.
Yeah, a lot of good learnings from it on our side, but ultimately at the end of the day is our number one priority being protecting our investors' capital.
Yeah, and I think we did that, and we will live to see another day.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.